Good evening, everybody. I am Travis Smith of Contractor Connection, and this is Shanaz Ikone, and we are here to talk about mental health in the construction industry and just in general. But as always, if you'll give me about 30 seconds, I'm going to share to the groups, and then we'll get things going. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're neighbors. Just so everybody knows, we've been friends on Facebook for a while. Friends, I would consider you a friend in life. We talked about some things before, and so very familiar with the background of this. And just recently, over the weekend, we had a conversation about mental health within the construction community, and felt like it was kind of timely for those who remember Shah Mansour from July. And then, we really wanted to talk about some other people and just honor them, but also talk about mental health in general, bring awareness to it, and see if there's some things that, some resources that can help. So with that, I will let you take the floor and go with it.
Thank you so much, Travis. I really appreciate you. Like I said, you're my neighbor and my friend. So anybody that you know automatically becomes my neighbor and friend. So I do want to open up the floor that we do have a chat box available. So if you have questions, if you want to type it in, or if there's a way for you to ask, please do so. This is really just something that's been put on my heart. I've been a therapist for over 10 years, and I was in a conference last week at the Palmer Center. It was a Small Business Connection, and there was 3 or 4 major construction businesses there. And I always go up and I introduce myself and I connect. And I ask them 2 questions. I ask them first and foremost, what is the biggest problem that you see currently within your industry, within your company? And people will be honest, and some people might give me a fluffy answer, but the demeanor of this gentleman changed at the booth. He kind of got a little bit more serious, his voice lowered, and he said, suicide. And that really took me by surprise, because I've been in the industry for mental health for a long time. But, the community of contractors and construction workers wasn't on the forefront until then. And since then, I haven't been really able to sleep, because that's something now that's on my heart to serve this community, because I'm an advocate for mental health. And so I really want to encourage and foster that communication, that I'm here to support you all. And I'm really here to listen and understand what are the major barriers, what is causing this, and how can I help and support that and advocate for you? Because if you give me a bat, I will come out swinging for you, and I will make sure that you guys are seen and advocated for. And of course, today is just about conversations and shedding light on the stigma within the industry. So I'm really excited to be here. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, there is very much a stigma. I think more so amongst the older generations than the younger generations. And I'm not trying to be ageist or anything about that.
Yeah.
But there's kind of the old fashioned thinking of, you don't talk about this kind of thing. You don't, mental health is suck it up, basically, And in fact, I had somebody in my Victoria group tell me that, in certain terms, and phrase this as something political, which it's not at all. This is a mental health issue that goes across both aisles. It is, as we talked about, suicide is the biggest cause of death for men, I believe, under the age of 25, 35, and 50. You have to go above 50 until you start getting into things like prostate cancer and things like that. And so, even if you're not in construction, but right now in construction, and like I told you, there's multiple people that I've known that this has happened to within the last few months. It is stressful because the economic landscape of things changed so rapidly. It went from people will kind of like for a long time Austin was like a well-baked, a well-smoked brisket in the smoker. You know, it was just going right along. The temperature's nice and rising. Then all of a sudden, everything just went crazy. You know, the housing market went crazy, so construction went crazy, and everybody started hiring everybody. Nobody's ever been this busy. We all think it's great, and just as quickly as that came, it stopped. And it's harder. You have to go through and you have to fire a lot of people. Which, if you ever had to fire anybody, you know, being fired absolutely sucks. I'm not going to disagree with that. Trust me, is the other person that on the other side of that is human. Firing you sucks unless you just really upset everybody.
Right.
You know, when you're in a position of laying people off because you don't have work or some things are happening, that's a terrible way to feel. But you don't have a choice, you know, and so there's a lot of different things that I think people are either experiencing for the first time or for the first time in a long time.
Absolutely.
In Austin specifically, but this is also happening nationally.
And I'm glad that you bring it up because I looked into some of the statistics behind it, and the construction industry has a 5 times higher than national average, which is very alarming. So if we think about, you know, suicide prevention and like statistics and numbers, we know that men have a higher rate of completing suicide by 78%. And we know the industry is predominantly males. And so this is a very huge concern. It's a public health issue in that sense, where they're not getting the support and the treatment that they deserve.
Exactly. And, you know, there is a lot more awareness now than 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, you know. There's people I've made posts about it. There's other people who are open about some of the mental health struggles they've gone through, what it's like to fail at something, you know. I mean, it doesn't feel good, you know, what it's like to go through and deal with, you know, as somebody who's diagnosed with depression and high anxiety. You know, it's like we're talking about before we came on air. Anxiety by itself can be so exhausting, especially if you're not really treating it, because you end up trying to solve, for me, it was trying to solve the same problem 20 times in a row. Even if I came up with a solution, I was right back to trying to solve that same problem. And I would catch myself doing it. I would be consciously doing it, and I could not stop. It was only until I went to go get help that like I was able to start getting into better places. And it still took a little while because medicine is a practice, and we tried some medicines and then tried some other medicines until we found where I needed to be. And then, so for like the last year, I've actually probably been in the best place of my life as far as mental health goes.
Oh, that's great.
But it's something that takes a daily focus to get to this point.
Exactly. And I appreciate your honesty in sharing that, because a lot of people, you know, don't talk about mental health issues so openly. So thank you for being an advocate and to kind of normalize that there's help available, there's therapy, there's medication management. And also, just to go back to what you were saying, you know, there's long hours within the industry. There's a physical and emotional strain. It's a very high stress, high paced, high deadline environment. And so, you know, those are also critical factors that you mentioned in addition to like the economy.
Yeah. It is. There is immense pressure, and it really doesn't matter what part of the industry you're in. You're feeling it from multiple places right now, and so it's tough. And I've talked to a lot of people, just from a business standpoint. This has been probably their hardest year, because construction and housing follow each other, and they've both their way down from what they were a couple years ago. Now it's starting to get better. But it's been a very tough thing for a lot of people. And it's something that I think a lot of people weren't prepared for, and don't have or don't feel that they have the support system to speak. And so at the service that we went to for Sean, we were talking about, you know, make sure you reach out to somebody. You know, just talk to somebody if you're feeling a certain way, because you'll never realize how many people love you. And so people don't just go out and say it a lot. People are very much quicker to criticize than to say kind things. But at the same time, people do think these kind things about you. Talk to other people, tell them
Mhm.
you're having a bad time. They will come and support and love on you, and they'll make it so much
Absolutely.
better.
And I appreciate you sharing that because first off, we have to have the conversation. Like this is obviously the beginning, but I hope that a lot of us can consider the people and places that we work at and how, a simple how are you or getting to know your coworker and really knowing like what their baseline is. So when the behavior seems to be off or you suspect something in your gut, that you can really ask them those hard questions and make sure they get the support that they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talked about one of the things that you've seen is some of the warning signs of,
Yes.
just mental health in general on a
Absolutely.
negative end, and
Yeah.
obviously somebody who's getting close to a suicidal type thought
Yeah,
process.
absolutely. So there's going to be many factors, and sometimes people say like hindsight is always 2020. And so the goal really is just to understand what to look for. Because if we can see the warning signs, right? Like imagine that you're turning on your car and your check engine light or your battery light comes on, you're like, yeah, I can go, right? I can keep going. But those warning signs are really there to help us understand that there could be potential danger ahead. And if we don't address it, it could be, quite dangerous. And so there's going to be several emotional signs that you want to look for. The first one is going to be like this overall sense of hopelessness. So you might have that individual that's expressing those feelings of despair, feeling like the doom and gloom is all around the corner. Maybe their energy has shifted. Hopelessness is usually the first sign that you're going to see in adults. And in addition to that, it's going to be mood swings and sadness. So they might have a history of depression, but you might notice that it feels like it's deeper or darker. Like when you check in, or, maybe they're not eating their lunch or they're not telling the jokes or inviting you over for, the fantasy football league. It could be so extreme in their moods that something feels off for you. You might even hear them say things like they're a burden, like they'd be better off dead, or they're not, loved enough, or they're having a really hard time. They might verbally express that and share that with you. And then also just this feeling of being trapped, right? So sometimes people will get into this place and it's so dark that they feel like suicide is the answer. And that's a very permanent thing for something that can be resolved. And so they might feel trapped in expressing themselves and feel like there's no way out. And so emotionally, those would be like your top 4 signs that you could probably start to recognize or look back and maybe see some of those things within their behaviors, whether it's at work or if you hung out with them after work. Other verbal signs, people are going to talk about it. You might hear them under their breath mumble like something, I wish I was dead. I don't want to be here. Or, the world would be better off without me. Those are when those, thoughts and feelings become words expressed. Something as simple as there's no point of trying, right? Or I can't see a future or way out of it. And, those are things that go back to the hopelessness. And so the emotional signs are there, there's verbal signs. And then also it's really important to recognize the physical signs, right? So maybe you see them and they're like really tired, or the person that is so dependent and reliable shows up late, or they look tired, or they're fatigued, because we know that like depression, anxiety, mental health is very exhausting, but you can tell if they're not sleeping enough or too little, right? And you might notice physical changes, right? So there could be a significant weight loss or a weight gain. Appetite tends to fluctuate when we're emotionally under distress. And so you might notice that. Also, we call these like somatic complaints, like the unexplained headache or the upset stomach or the achy joints, things that medically are, no underlying illness. Emotionally, our body holds onto a lot of pain, physical pain. So we might have tension in our neck and spine. Obviously, the construction business is very physical. So you might feel it in your knees, your legs. And so these are oftentimes the physical symptoms and warning signs. And then obviously, when you hear the person, maybe you hear them like getting the prescription stockpiled, or maybe, they have a gun and, they're talking about getting new bullets, or, things like that. Those would be signs and red flags to look out for. Obviously, sometimes people would give stuff away. So say you have a colleague or coworker and they're trying to find a place to rehome their pets or their dogs, or they're giving away their baseball cards or like special things that they would hold on to. If they're like making plans to get rid of stuff, that's also a tell sign that, things might be happening because there might be a plan or action in place. It's no longer this thought process or no longer this feeling of hopelessness or dread. It's like, now I have a plan or action. And that's when it's really important to understand these signs so that you can get them to help immediately. And so if you come across somebody like this and there's no guarantee of safety, you're not sure what their home life is like, or if they have support systems or families or protective factors, which I'll explain in a little bit, then 911 is going to be your best option. 911 is the emergency number. They're going to send somebody, an ambulance, police, and they'll take them to an inpatient center like Austin Oaks or a behavioral health center to get assessed. They do free assessments there. And so that's a resource. And then there's also a suicide and crisis lifeline that's 988. That is also a universal number where they'll send somebody to assess and support them. And if you are in Austin, Texas, say you have a friend or maybe you're a supervisor and you have a team of people and the one person that leads it didn't show up and you're worried about them, you can actually call MCUTS, the Mobile Crisis Outreach Team. They will actually go to that person's house and do a safety assessment, check in on them. We call it a welfare check. And so it's important to also have information about your employees. HR will probably have their phone number, their emergency contact, and their address. But if you are running a construction team, it's so vital to have their information, their contact information, should there be a crisis.
Yeah, definitely. A few takeaways from that is having, felt some of those things. The biggest one for me, whenever I felt the most stressed, was I completely lost my appetite. And it was April of 2018. I had done my first 3 flips, been robbed and left with half-finished jobs by contractors. That's why I got into construction and eventually started Contractor Connection. But so I'm sitting there with these 3 houses, none of them is sold. I have an investor that I loved and I'm trying to perform for so I can make this something that I'm doing. And for that entire month of April, I think I lost 25 pounds because I couldn't eat. We would go out I went to a couple times. My birthday was in April. We went to one of my favorite restaurants and got steak and shrimp. And I had 2 bites of the steak and couldn't finish the rest of the food.
Wow.
Just sheer, I tried to force myself to eat and it wasn't happening. And then also I think when people really get close to the point of no return is when they do feel the trapped, when they do feel because I think the trapped leads to a lot of other different emotions that you described, a lot of your ability to see solutions and look beyond where you're at and to the future, understanding that things for instance, one thing that was told to me in one of my darkest times with my dad was, if you talk to people in their 70s and their 80s, their biggest regret wasn't necessarily they spent too much time working or didn't see their kids enough. Their biggest regret was they spent too much time worrying about stuff that never came to fruition.
Right.
So and that's one of the things that it took some time and some work, but if you can get away from worrying and you're never going to get fully away from it, right? We're humans, that's part of human nature. But if you can start to understand, is this something that I control? Is this something that I can't control? Exactly. And immediately, if it's something that you can't control, start to try and move away from that, because worrying about it's not going to change anything except negatively affect you.
Exactly. And I think it's so important to remember, there's coping strategies, right? Like you said, spending time with your family. I mentioned protective factors. These are things that we look for in anyone where, do they have a community within their neighbors, a church group? Do they have pets? Do they have friends? Do they have people calling and checking on them? Do they have hobbies and interests? These are protective factors because this helps reduce, the option of suicide, right? Because people have somebody to live for. I've had a client that's I'm alive because my cat is here, right? And that is their protective factor. Some people that we work with may not have family or kids. And so we have to make sure also those that are isolated and don't have a sense of community to really bring them in. And I think you've done a great job with that with the Facebook group and bringing people together. So I just want to commend you for building that connection in such like an isolated industry.
Well, thank you for that. It's been a long 5-6 years passion project of creating it. And it just continues to evolve beyond any of our expectations.
Yeah.
And it allows us, for example, to have a platform like this to where we can talk to, when it's broadcast to the 4 groups, there's over 100,000 members in there that are going to at some point come across it, see it, and hopefully it helps people,
Absolutely.
And I've always been of the thought that if it helps even one person, then it's entirely worth doing.
Absolutely. And, for those that are watching live, welcome. For those that have questions, if you have questions, feel free to use the chat box and ask something. But for those that are going to watch it later, if you guys can just put replay at the bottom so it changes the algorithm so those that need to see it can see it throughout the Facebook page, or if you want to share the video, these are just some basic warning signs for suicide prevention, because the more we talk about it, the better off somebody will be to know they're not alone.
Yes, that is one of the biggest things, is for people to know they're not alone. Absolutely. For people to know, especially in this digital age, as isolating as it can be, it can also, I think we don't realize that even though there's like one of my best friends I've never met before, but I'm actually going to meet this weekend. He's flying down from Minneapolis and we're going to watch some soccer together.
Oh, amazing.
And we have known each other and hung out and played FIFA with each other for hours, probably for the last like 10 years.
Wow.
So, and there's people out there like that, that you get to connect with that you might not ever see, but they do care about you. They are your real friends, like that is another community that you can connect with.
Absolutely. I don't see any questions rolling in, Travis, but as you kind of think about the direction of like the construction industry, where do you feel like the biggest need might be? Just if you had to share your thoughts around this.
I think the biggest need is just getting people to, at minimum, kind of try and build out their support, try and have people that you can talk to and vent to, and it helps if they're in the same industry because you feel the same struggles,
Absolutely.
Or just reach out and talk to anybody. But just, if you have some things going through your mind, process those, but have some people you can do that with, because that changes everything. I was lucky in my darkest times. I have my brother who's close to my age. I could talk to him. I could talk to my wife, who's amazingly supportive. I have my parents who live in Austin. Like it's funny to have ever gotten to that point because I'm very blessed, and that's another thing is, do you want to really try and build up this place of gratitude? Because no matter, I don't want to say no matter how bad you have it, there are people who do have it really rough, but like it is everything can be solved. And there is so many people out there, and there's so many things to be grateful for. There's so many things. I saw the saying once, how many things do you have now that you used to pray to have, And that's what my wife, my kids, my house, all of those type of things,
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because it's about perspective. I always have my clients when they're going through a really dark time, like you shared, is like, imagine an infinite timeline. Like it just continuously moves forward. And then imagine what you're going through is like that dot in your timeline, and look at all this extra space that you have left, right? And so it's just like perspective that like, yes, people might have it really bad, but the goal is so that you're not alone and there's help available so that you can have that for yourself, right?
Well, and I like to also too, that's an excellent way to put it, especially thinking forward, but I also like to think back, and you go back to like, man, in high school and college, there was these things that just like stressed us out, right? Like freaked us out. They were the end of the world.
Right.
How many of those do you even remember anymore? Like how many of those register to you or are relevant in your life, And the same thing, like you don't want to minimize what you're going through, because it might be issues that you have to solve, right? There might be things going on that you need to address. But
Right.
in 10 years, when you look back, what are you
Mhm.
going to really remember from that? You know?
Exactly. And I think that's a great point. It's like sometimes we can look back and realize, we have a lot to be grateful for. And for those that are going through things that nobody knows about, I would encourage you to find somebody to talk to, right? Like I put my website, my email will be listed. If you need support in finding a therapist or what therapy is like, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. The goal is really to reduce the stigma so that you have access and the care that you deserve. And so I also want to put it out there that on the form or like the podcast description with Travis, there's a little QR code. And this is really just like 10 questions. It really gives you an opportunity to share like what the biggest need is for mental health support. Because my goal is to continue this conversation within larger scale so that I can provide support on site or within trainings so that the number can be reduced. And so this can kind of pioneer the next step for mental health and to normalize it within the community.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, if it can promote people to, the easiest thing is just to reach out to a couple people and build that support. And
Yes.
then, if you really are, if it's affecting you physically, your appetite, your sleep, go see a doctor for it. It's worth, even if you're not insured, because I've been uninsured before,
Yeah.
it's worth going to see the doctor. It's worth going and trying to work with them and figure it out. And it's worth, if the first person, whether it's a doctor or a therapist,
Mhm.
having gone through that and knowing other people do, you want to make sure both of those people are people you're comfortable talking to, because
Exactly.
otherwise there's no reason to go.
Right.
You want to find the therapist. I'm sure you would say the same thing to them, is you
Mhm.
want them to be comfortable with you, talking to you, letting you know what's going on, and having
Yes.
an open, honest conversation. With both a therapist and a doctor, you can literally tell them anything, and
Mhm.
that conversation can never leave the room,
Right.
legally, everything else.
Exactly.
So feel free, like, let it
Yeah.
all go in there and talk to people. And therapy and medicine, it saves lives. It really does. I
Mm.
firmly believe that.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so if that's something that people need to destigmatize that as well,
Mhm.
um, I think that's happening, but obviously I think there's still some work to do on that.
Absolutely. And, for those that have just joined, this is going to be, recorded for later. So if there's somebody that you did lose to suicide or somebody that you lost that you love, if you want to remember them by just dropping their name or their initials, just so we can hold space for that. Because, when you think about grief and loss, it does impact not only that direct family, but that community and workplace. And so I do want to make sure that we acknowledge those that were not here because of suicide.
There is a big ripple effect
Hmm.
that I think gets underestimated every time until it
Hmm.
happens again.
Yeah.
And even whether it's somebody that you talked to a couple weeks ago,
Hmm.
or it's an old friend that you haven't talked to in maybe 10 or 15 years,
Yes,
when you hear it, it hurts.
it does.
And I often used to think, because I come from a place where there was quite a bit of that in high school,
Mhm.
and in college. And
Yeah.
so I used to think that I'd grown some toughness to it, and also that it wouldn't be as prevalent at this stage in my life. And
Mhm.
yet it seems in the last couple of years to have come back,
Mhm.
um, and started happening with a higher frequency than I've ever seen.
Yes.
And I find it alarming. And like I've said, I've gone through some different dark places on my own,
Mhm.
happy to come out to the other side. But it's an unnerving time. I know there's a
Mhm.
lot of factors that go into it. We could spend days talking about the effects, mental health from social media, which
Abs
ironically, this is on a social media platform.
Yeah.
But social media, how much less time people spend with each other now than they
Yeah.
did 5 or 10 years ago. I mean,
Mhm.
the down drop is dramatic, especially for younger ages.
Mhm.
A lot of us who grew up in the pre-digital age, all we wanted to do was leave the house and go hang out with our friends. You
Right.
know, for
Yeah.
those of us who have teenagers, the majority that I've spoken to, and my
Hmm.
teenagers like this, she's not want to go out and hang out with friends.
Yeah.
She wants to hang out in a room. Now she has digital friends again and people she talks
Mhm.
to, but to me that's not the same. It's
Exactly.
not the same as seeing somebody face to face and talking to them. And
Yeah.
we have less of that. And I think
Mhm.
it also has created a level of angst and a
Mhm.
level of negative discourse in the way we talk to people sometimes that didn't used to exist. Like people feel more free to curse and yell at people, I think, than they used to.
Yeah.
And it's still not appropriate. It's
Right.
still really never okay, But for some reason, that seems to be something that's a little more available to some folks.
Right.
And people just don't think about what it's like to be on the other side of that.
Hmm.
Or even if they do think about it afterwards, they'll just rationalize and justify why they did it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think there's something really special that you said, like back in our day, people would be out, we'd be at the movies, the malls, wherever, and we'd be just out socially connecting. And I think the pandemic has really shifted that and has increased, like, social anxiety and stress and depression. And we have, our phones, and our phones are always there, but it's not enough. And so I would encourage you all, like, this week, set an intention where you put your phone up and you like eat your dinner without scrolling, or you wake up in the morning and instead of getting on your phone to get on Facebook or TikTok, it's like, hey, let me take a moment to breathe and center myself. Let me take a moment of mindfulness to appreciate what I have. And going back to the community, it's like you can create community anywhere. You can go outside on a walk. I mean, like our neighborhood pages community, going
Oh,
to the
I
gym.
love our neighborhood page.
Yes. Yes, you can find community anywhere just so that you're not alone. Like I have people that are new to the area, go to Target and walk around, right? Go sign up at a gym class, get to know people and connect and find your place in people so they can also check in on you, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
And not only that, but as you interact with people consistently,
Mhm.
they'll notice some of the signs. They'll
Yeah.
notice when you're not having the best day.
Mhm.
And they'll probably also notice if you don't necessarily want to talk about it right then,
Yeah,
because you don't always want to talk about it, right? And it's not the worst
absolutely.
thing in the world if you
Yeah.
just want to kind of stew for a little bit. Just don't do
Yeah.
that every time. Don't do that all the time.
Right.
Um, don't
Yeah,
build up that pressure. Let people
exactly.
in. So
And I would also say, don't be worried about saying the wrong thing, right? It's like, hey, so and so, I'm worried about you, or, I haven't seen you at this event, or, you seem a little off. Can we talk? Like, don't be afraid to ask those questions. So they're like, oh, yeah, somebody's thinking about me, right? Or get
yes.
them to think about what they're doing as well. So don't be afraid to ask questions. There's no right or wrong, way to ask a question, but just, hey, I'm here for you if you need something, or why don't you come over and we'll barbecue, or why don't we go do something like that, right?
Exactly. Or as I always say, just say something nice to somebody. If you see somebody do something cool, tell them.
Yeah.
If you notice something that's awesome about somebody, just let them know,
Yeah.
just let
Yes.
them know in a message or let them know in a comment. Like, I think
Mhm.
you're awesome. I love you. I think what you say is really smart. Just tell them
Mhm.
that. You'll either have a really good conversation or you'll make somebody's day. I promise you will,
Yeah.
because I think almost everybody gets more criticism than they get compliments. It's just the
Mhm.
way that modern life is,
Right.
and so the more that we can compliment each other,
Mhm.
especially when it's deserved, but even if we can just find things and somebody's not having the best of times, to
Yeah,
build it back up, it goes a million miles.
exactly. And you don't know how that will impact them too, right? That might be the first positive thing. Maybe they've been criticized all day, and that's the first thing for that light to shed into their heart, their mind, to say, "Hey, you know what? Travis said this about me. He's right."
Yeah. There's a meme about men who get compliments once every, I think it's 730 days or something like that, and they remember that compliment all the way through the 730 days,
Yes.
hold on to it.
You're right.
And
Right.
it is, it's kind of like that sometimes. But there's a lot of people that I think do a really good job, who are trying really hard in life, who are
Mhm.
doing the best that they can, and on a daily basis, trying to do the best thing that they
Mhm.
can, the right thing that they can.
Yes.
And they don't always see the results for that. And that can be
Mhm.
frustrating. but
Yeah.
they should know that they're doing a great job. If you're out
Right.
here making it right now, you're doing a great job. You really are. If
Yeah.
your company is still going, you're doing fantastic. Like you should be proud of yourself and take moments for that.
Right.
One other thing I would actually like to veer into, and I think this does play into mental health because in construction specifically, there's a lot of people who work 7 days a week,
Oh yes. Oh my goodness.
12-hour days. It's really prevalent too in the immigrant community where essentially they come here for a certain amount of time. They're
Mm-hmm.
trying to make as much money as they can, and they want to go back to their family.
Mm-hmm.
However, and I'm sure you know this better than I do, but I had to learn this the hard way until I started, like you said, on Sundays, I don't look at my phone almost.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do anything. I don't
Yeah.
let anything get into my peace on
Mm-hmm.
Sunday
Right.
because that's my day for church, family, and just to
Mhm.
relax and get to a better place.
Right. Yeah.
With I think with a lot of people, they have a hard time, especially when they're business owners in a smaller business,
Yeah.
of being able to disconnect because there literally is always something for them to do,
Oh,
you know?
100%. Yeah.
And they know that too. It's always in their head. Like they could hop on their computer with
Yeah.
nothing to do. Well, I could be doing some marketing. I need to message this guy back. There's this email I could send. There's this idea, like it's always going on. And you have to turn that off sometimes, or you'll
Right.
literally, I have seen it multiple times, but it'll lead to burnout.
Oh, 100%.
And burnout can lead to other things
Mm-hmm.
that, like I said, I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
And it's not cool to watch, and you feel
Mhm.
really bad for the person because once a person reaches, like there's a stage of burnout that once they reach, there's no returning to what they were doing. They're
Yeah.
going off in a different direction.
Exactly. And also it's important to remember that rest is essential. Like as an entrepreneur myself, like if you're not resting or taking time to take care of yourself, you're going to get sick. Like your body can only
Yes.
take so much. Like if you think about the car example, it's like you have to get an oil change, you have to get a tire rotation. Otherwise, you're going to be driving till the wheels fall off. And that's what burnout is.
Yes, it
It's like,
really is.
yes.
It's like I tell people because I used to be a teacher,
I didn't know that.
and when I was a teacher, if I was having a really bad day or if I
Mhm.
wasn't feeling well, you can get a substitute. But when you're a business owner,
Yeah.
there's no substitute. There's nobody to come in and fill your spot. There's nobody
No
to
free
take
time off.
care of what's on your plate. It's
Mhm.
all on you.
Yeah.
And you feel that. And for those that have families, they are supports, but they can be sources of pressure because you have to
Mhm.
perform for them. You have kids or a spouse, you want to show out for them. You want to be that person that you're supposed to be for them, that you
Right.
feel that expectation. And
Mhm.
that can also weigh as much as it can uplift.
Right. And I think that's important to have a conversation. It's like, where is that pressure coming from? Because oftentimes we're our own worst critic, right? It's like, oh man,
Yeah.
like this is my monthly revenue. I need to get this, or I need to have this many clients. Or like you said, you can continuously work. But at the end of the day, also, you want to make sure you have time for yourself and your kids and your family and your community, because that's also your sense of purpose, right? You're not just here to work and work, work, work. There's also other
No.
things and identities that everybody holds. And so it's like, how do you find time to identify and honor that? And you said yours is on a Sunday, right? Mine is like Friday, Saturday-ish, right? Like that's my time to
Yep.
unplug, connect, give back, do all the things that fill my cup because I can't pour from an empty cup. Nobody can.
And you can let people know, hey, this is my
Yeah.
time that I'm taking with my family and for
Mhm.
my personal life, whenever it might be, a
Right.
Friday and a Saturday, a Sunday, it could be a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
Yeah.
And if anybody has a problem with that, then they don't actually really respect you
Mhm. Yeah.
because everybody is owed at least a day or two a week
Yes.
where they can be human and
Exactly.
not this business,
Mhm.
not this company,
Yes.
not this persona,
Mhm.
where they can just be themselves. And like I said, if anybody has a problem with that, then they're probably a pretty toxic person because these
Right.
days, I think most people understand like,
Yes.
oh, you don't want to work 7 days a week, like that's cool, you know,
Yeah,
like,
nobody does.
yeah.
Yeah, but I understand that some people might be in that financial situation, but I do encourage that if that is the case, that they do have that moment of rest or, hydrate, move your body, make sure that you're sleeping well. All the basic components to health and wellness do play a role in mental health.
Yes. Like somebody once said, we're complicated houseplants. We need sunlight and water and to touch grass.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
Meditating is another great, fantastic thing
Yeah.
that really helped me a lot. Just kind of slow things down in my mind sometimes.
Mhm.
And usually it's only for like 10 minutes a day, but it's something that I
Yeah.
think is really crucial as well.
Yeah, they say that meditation can reduce like anxiety and stress by 40%. So it's definitely a great tool. And I encourage people to start tapping into that.
It is more difficult than it looks, though. I'll say that much.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
Yes.
to actually, because I did the Calm app where somebody,
Yeah.
talking to you through it,
Mhm.
and they essentially constantly remind you,
Yeah.
bring it back to your breathing,
Yeah. Just your breath.
because your mind starts to go to places.
Mhm.
And if you're high anxiety, your mind's like, oh, I'm going to take this journey off to the worst thing possible.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. And something as simple as like a body scan, right? So that's an opportunity just to check in from your head to your toe. Like, is my jaw clenched? Can I, unclench my jaw? Can I roll my shoulders back? Like, do I have a smartwatch that's saying, hey, stand up, like walk around, do things? Those are things to check in with your body because we know that, stress and trauma, anxiety is very much a physical component. So we do have to take care of our bodies.
yeah, the jaw clenching is where I go to quite a bit,
Yeah.
and I have to catch myself doing.
Hmm.
But I will feel it after a while, and it'll physically
Yeah.
remind me to, hey, you
Do
need to
it.
chill out a little bit.
Exactly.
Um, I haven't thought about the shoulders. I guess that's a pretty good one too. So
Mhm. Yeah, and like you said, I think breathing is also really important just to focus on your breath, and these are some of the things you can do for, like, coping strategies. A few like, 3 deep breaths, right? And get about to your day. That can really change something.
it sounds simple. It's something that we've been told for a long time, but
Mhm.
it's tried and true. It's very effective
Yeah.
in those situations. And again, if things like that aren't, and you're still physically in a bad place, having
Mhm.
gone through all those steps, then again, you want to go to a therapist or a doctor
Yeah.
and get that help that you
Mhm.
get, because otherwise you will get exhausted fighting that battle by yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. I wonder if any of the viewers have any questions or anything before we wrap up, or if there's anything else?
It doesn't look like, but I think if we'll have some questions that pop up, like you said, if y'all have questions as you're watching this on replay, if you'll
Mhm.
post them in there,
Yes.
be happy to go back and address those. And hopefully, this won't be the last time that the group sees you. I would love for you to
Absolutely.
come in and post.
Yes.
Come check out some of the things that we have and just talk to people and just have the conversations with them.
Yeah.
And again, thank you so much for being on tonight. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. And if anybody here has any questions, I put my website, it's my name. So it's just shanazikone.com. So if you need me to come to your workplace or if you need therapy or if you need support, I'm here for you. I'm here to advocate and support you so that you're not alone. So thank you so
Yeah.
much, Travis.
And if anybody ever feels the need to talk with a tough time going through business or anything else, I'm here for it. I've been there. It will get better, I promise you. So I'm not professional help by any means, but I am somebody you can shoot a message to, and I'll be happy to help in any way that I can. But thank you all as always for watching, and thank you again so much, Shanaz, for being on
Yeah,
tonight.
thanks, Travis. My
All right,
pleasure.
you have a great evening.
You too. Bye.